Today we're going to talk about why Americans are leaving Costa Rica. Hey, how's it going, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more amazing travel experiences. I think it could be kind of interesting to hear why people leave as well as why people come, because it kind of gives you a better picture. I think of living abroad in another country. So today we're going to talk about why Americans are leaving Costa Rica. Okay, so let me preface this by saying that my personal opinion is that if you do your homework, if you plan properly, if you come down here and you actually find a place that you like and that meets your needs and that you can afford, then Costa Rica is a great place to live. It really is. I think it's a great place to visit, and I think it's a great place to live. But I also have to be honest and say that it is not perfect, and there are some reasons why people might want to leave Costa Rica. So with that being said, let's go ahead and dive into the reasons why Americans are leaving Costa Rica. The first reason why Americans are leaving Costa Rica is because they miss their family and friends back home. Now, this is very common when you move to a foreign country. And I think that this happens to retirees a lot, especially retirees that move to Costa Rica, who have children and grandchildren. They come down here and they love it, and they decide to retire here. But after a while, they start missing their family and friends back home. Maybe they don't get to see them as often as they would like. And this is one of the main reasons why they decide to go back home. Or maybe they decide to move to a place like Panama, which is closer to the US and other countries like Colombia and Ecuador. Those are more popular destinations as well for retirees because they are closer to the US. So if you are someone who is considering moving to Costa Rica, but you do have family and friends back in the US that you want to stay close to, something to keep in mind is that Costa Rica is quite a ways away from the US if you're coming from the East Coast. You're looking at about a 5-hour flight to get here. If you're coming from the West Coast, it's going to be about a 3-hour flight. So it's definitely a bit of a trek to get down here. And so if you are someone who has family and friends back home that you like to see often, then maybe this won't be the best option for you. But if you're someone who doesn't mind traveling back to the US every few months to see them, then that shouldn't be an issue. Alright, the second reason why Americans are leaving Costa Rica is because they do speak Spanish and they rather live in a more English-friendly country. Now, I have to admit that Costa Rica is becoming less of an English-friendly country than it used to be. When I first got here about 10 years ago, it was a lot easier to get by speaking only English. These days, it's definitely helpful to know some Spanish. In fact, I would say it's necessary to know some Spanish in order to get by. There are many foreigners who live here in Costa Rica who speak no Spanish, and they tend to isolate themselves. And they do and really get to experience all that Costa Rica has to offer simply because they refuse to learn the language. Many Costa Ricans are bilingual, and they speak English very well, especially if they work in a tourist-related field. However, if you venture outside of the tourist areas, you're going to find that it's going to be harder to get by speaking only English. In fact, in many small towns and rural areas, you will find that hardly anyone speaks any English at all. So if you're someone who prefers to live in a more English-speaking, friendly country, then maybe Costa Rica isn't the best option for you. I know some expats who have moved to countries like Mexico and Panama, which are known for being more English-friendly. So if you are someone who wants to live in an English-speaking environment, those could be better options for you. But I will say that Costa Rica is becoming less English-friendly these days, so that is something to keep in mind. Alright, the third reason why Americans are leaving Costa Rica is because they miss American conveniences. Now, this is another very common reason why people leave Costa Rica. Some Americans are just too comfortable with the American way of life, and they adjust to living in a developing country. Now, I have to admit that Costa Rica does lack some of the conveniences that we are accustomed to back in the US, for example. Internet service in Costa Rica is not nearly as reliable as it is in the US also. Cell phone service can be spotty in some areas. And there is just not as much variety of products and services here in Costa Rica as there is in the US. If you go to the grocery store here, you will find many of the same products that you would find back in the US, but there will be fewer choices overall. And you will also find that certain brands that you may be accustomed to back home are not available here in Costa Rica. And I think this can be especially frustrating for people who have specific dietary needs or allergies, and they rely on certain products that are not available here in Costa Rica. So if you are someone who is very particular about what you eat, and you need certain things in order to survive, maybe Costa Rica isn't the best option for you. It's important to note that Costa Rica is a developing country, and it will never be as developed as the United States. The infrastructure is not as advanced, the technology is not as developed, the roads are not as good, but for most people, these inconveniences are not a big deal, and they are easily outweighed by the benefits of living in a country with a lower cost of living. Better weather, beautiful beaches, lush rainforests, and friendly people. However, for some Americans, these inconveniences are enough of a hassle that they decide to return back home to the U.S., where they can enjoy the comforts of American life. All right, the fourth reason why Americans are leaving Costa Rica is because of crime. Now, crime is definitely an issue in Costa Rica. I talk about this in many of my videos. In recent years, crime has become more prevalent in Costa Rica, especially property crime. Violent crime is relatively rare, but property crimes such as car theft, motorcycle theft, home break-ins, and robberies are becoming more common. Now I live in an area that is relatively safe, and I take precautions to ensure that I am safe, such as having a security system installed at my home. I also avoid walking around at night, and I don't flash my expensive camera equipment. Additionally, I don't drive a brand new luxury car, and I don't wear flashy jewelry. By taking these simple precautions, I have been able to live in Costa Rica for almost 10 years without ever being the victim of a crime. However, it is important to note that crime does exist here in Costa Rica, and it is something that you should be aware of. If you are from the US, Canada, Europe, Australia, or New Zealand, you are probably used to a certain level of safety and security, and you might find that Costa Rica is a bit more dangerous than what you are accustomed to back home. Now, personally, I think the level of crime here is not that bad, and I am willing to accept this risk in exchange for the other benefits of living here, like the warm weather, the beautiful beaches, and the low cost of living. However, some people are not comfortable with the level of crime here in Costa Rica, and they decide to move somewhere else where they feel safer. All right. So those are 4 reasons why Americans are leaving Costa Rica. It's because they miss their family and friends back home. It's because they don't speak Spanish, and they'd rather live in a more English-friendly country. It's because they miss the American conveniences. And it's also because of the crime. Now, I'm sure there are other reasons why people leave Costa Rica, but these are the main ones that I can think of. Now, I hope this video has undiscouraged you about living in Costa Rica, because my personal opinion is that Costa Rica is a great place to live. I love living here. I have no plans on leaving anytime soon. However, I do think it is important to be realistic about the drawbacks of living in Costa Rica, as well as the benefits. And I think it is important to weigh the pros and the cons before making a decision about whether or not to move here. If you have any questions about living in Costa Rica, please feel free to reach out to me through the provided contact information. I would love to help you out. Thank you so much for watching this video, and I hope you found it useful or at least entertaining. If you did, I invite you to subscribe to the channel. I put out new videos every single week. Also, if you're on social media, I have a page that I would love for you to join. Post updates there every single day. Thanks again for watching, and I hope you come back soon to watch another video.